You mean Darren, man? Give me your right arm to find out who done him. I swear Tommy I'd fucking tortured him to death.
The third season of Love Hate is commonly referred to as the best one, and upon the rewatch, I would have to agree. This is as good as it gets, and it gets very good. This thing moves at a clip. From the get-go, the main characters are flung into a situation which just escalates the more they try to cover up. Everybody reacts exactly the way people would react to these situations in real life. There is almost no B-plot. Gone are the scenes of, for instance, Nidge and Trish meeting a school principal, or Trish and Mary talking about boys.
I'm so horny, I get up on Shrek.
In this season, apart from some light and much needed humorous scenes with Ado and Nadine and Potsy.
Now, send a picture out to the chair, will you?
What?
For fuck's sake, it's only a photograph. I'm paying you, haven't I?
Every scene in this thing ties back to the main story, and almost every scene moves it forward with so many people being affected and so many people trying to do what's best for them. And it all leads to a finale which upends the show and changes how you watch it. This season feels bigger in a lot of ways. The camera work is more dynamic, such as this scene where Donna is being followed only for it to be revealed that we are looking at her from inside Fran's van. In the first two seasons, scenes with characters out and about in Dublin were done with close-up and minimal extras. Now, these characters are out in the streets and it just feels more real, and at the time this was just extraordinary. This season was coming out around about the same time Netflix was kicking into gear, and it was already a thing that people were binge watching American hour-long dramas. Stuff like Walking Dead, Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones were at their peaks, and it was just mad that you could go from watching these things to something made so close to home and there being no adjustment period. Usually whenever you go see an Irish movie at the cinema, you've to sit through about a whole minute of production company logos because the funding is so disparate for this stuff. That's an observation and not a criticism, as clearly my time isn't that precious since I spent an evening recently watching a show I've already seen to make this video. But when you put on Love Hate, by the time of season 3, there was no notion of our little prestige drama that could. This thing could go toe to toe with the best stuff from America for your attention. The jump in quality is potentially due to a larger budget, which may also serve as an explanation for something else that changes this season: the music.
What was it? Guns N' Roses.
Up until now, the music in the show was mainly late 90s, early 2000s hip-hop and R&B, such as Biggie, although oddly enough just the tracks from the two posthumous albums, Jay-Z, Kanye, Ja Rule, Ashanti, R. Kelly and 50 Cent. A lot of 50 Cent. Now, it's the likes of Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and other classic rock and pop songs. A change I have mixed feelings about. I feel like the previous season, the background music was the sort that the characters were listening to. Nate has a Tupac poster, and John has a tattoo of one of his songs, and he puts him and Biggie on his Huey painting. And a lot of the soundtrack emanated from a source within the show, like a car radio or a stereo, like in The Wire. Whereas now it's changed to the music you would assume the people who make the show like. If it was just a case of basing my opinion on music I prefer to listen to, obviously then I would prefer the soundtrack of the first two seasons. And for the Irish rap fans among you, season 2 did feature Lethal Dialect on the soundtrack. However, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that these opening montages are much more purposeful now as they're being edited to these classic tracks. This is a change that stays with the show till it ends, and it is a net positive because some of these intros are quite well done. Dublin has never looked better, and it's just as well because the story of this season could only be told here. As for what the story is, this season begins with the first flash forward in time where Darren, Nidge and Tommy are looking at something. The story then begins proper when the IRA mistake Ado for someone else and shoot him in the leg. Knowing all too well that he's outgunned, Nidge decides to do nothing. This aggravates Darren, who gets fired up on drugs and pipe bombs the IRA pub. Nidge, in a desperate bid to stop them from retaliating, goes for a few drinks with them on St. Patrick's Day and he can't get rid of them. And when the old man Git does what he does to Siobhan, he's killed by Tommy and Darren, leading us to now seeing the opening scene again. The body is buried and the rest of this season is Nidge trying desperately to hide what happened, and the whole thing falls apart. The first two seasons, the first in particular, told stories which I thought just so happened to take place in Ireland rather than being about Ireland. This is wholly out of the window this season. For one, the IRA are the main antagonists, not that that's exclusive to stories in Ireland, but for two, we actually hear, albeit briefly, Irish being spoken.
Sláinte.
But what I find most inspired is having Patrick's Day being the day the story kicks off, because it is the perfect excuse for people being drunker than usual, particularly for those who believe themselves patriots. While St. Patrick's Day is celebrated all around the world, in the unlikely event anyone is watching this outside of Ireland, I cannot overstate just how bonkers Dublin city centre is on this day. At least that's what people who leave their house tell me. So, to talk about this story, one has to talk about what happens to Siobhan, because it is what it all comes back to.
Give us an old kiss, will you?
Now, if somebody is writing a story and they can write it without including this, they should. In some cases, it's just done for shock value. There's been backlash even in cases where it's done merely via an allegory, like in Maleficent. Cat Williams told of standing up to studio heads to have a scene involving it removed from Friday After Next on the basis that it is never funny, and when a scene of it came up in the Nostalgia Critic Anniversary special, it was filmed despite protestations of the people who performed the scene, and it was not funny there either. Then again, Cat Williams says a lot of things, and nothing the Nostalgia Critic has ever made has been funny. However, this season deserves the credit that the way this subject is treated is anything but flippant. The scene of the event itself isn't even the most painful thing for me when I watch it. There is scene after scene of Siobhan describing how it made her feel, physically and mentally, treatment she has to receive in relation to it. But above everything else, I think what validates this is it feels like it was written because Stuart Carolan had something to say about what would happen if something like this happened in this world. Because it happens in this world, she is sworn to secrecy. She can't talk about it with anybody. When she does talk, the moments where she's approaching something cathartic, she has to cut herself off for having said too much. The one time she does confide in someone, there are huge repercussions. But the way the people around her treat her as well. This is the season where Nidge stops being funny.
Get her some tablets, she'll get over it.
You go around dressed like a mutt in heat, and some hound will try and get up on you and give you a poke.
Because Nidge is incapable of thinking about anybody but himself. When it happens, he just wants her to shut up.
Shut up, will you, Siobhan? We can figure out what to do. Nidge!
He does not want her going to the clinic and makes the flimsiest justification.
What's she want to get an AIDS test for? He was married, wasn't he?
He expects her to keep it together under police questioning. He invites the son of the man who did it to her birthday. He blames Tommy for not taking her home. He maintains Tommy just has to keep her happy. And while Nidge doesn't have a leg to stand on, he'd have less ammunition if Tommy had a bit more restraint.
Another thing, you're barred from seeing a junkie.
For all intents and purposes, this is Tommy's last season, and his behaviour is even more deplorable this time around. Tommy has continued an affair with Debbie, who now works and lives in a brothel. He keeps this going after what happens to Siobhan. He brings his kid in with him, and while this is going on, Siobhan is off saying that he is doing his best. And then only when he's getting around to finishing with Debbie, he goes and gets off with Georgina, the daughter-in-law of the man who forced himself on Siobhan. For once, it looks like Tommy might actually get some comeuppance for his actions, as Georgina is an unstable woman.
What are you watching?
Saw 6.
Perhaps he should have been watching Fatal Attraction. However, when he tells Nidge, who wanted Georgina for himself, Nidge beats him up and you never see Tommy again. Who Tommy is in the 4th season is the shadow of his former self, and he's in a coma for the 5th season. And it just never occurred to me till this rewatch that all Tommy did in this show's first 3 seasons was get off with other women and then get beat up. I really don't remember thinking about just how terrible Tommy is. I remember liking him, and I still do. And I really think that's all down to Killian Scott as an actor. Early seasons of Love Hate were criticised for casting actors who were too pretty and that they weren't representative of what these guys are actually like, and
well, you better tell me what the story is or you get a breeze block across the head, you hear me, Luke?
Sorry.
maybe Tommy isn't convincing as a criminal, but he's very charismatic.
Do you ever have one of them days?
Don't talk to me. Today's one of them. Then I go home, smoke a joint, and hopefully wake up, and tomorrow's another day.
The relationship between Tommy and Debbie is comparable to watching a car crash in slow motion. He's a criminal with a kid and a girlfriend, and she's a prostitute addicted to heroin. Is there any version of this that would work?
If we didn't already have Leighton, it'd be different.
You'd run away with me, would you?
Yeah.
Pomala Shin, she is living above the shop and her hours are unlikely to be 9 to 5, so it really all comes down to when Tommy wants to see her. She taunts him with how her relationship with him isn't all that different from her relationship with the other men, he just doesn't pay for it. Earlier I mentioned the opening montage is set to classic rock and pop songs, and to my mind one of the best ones is set to Angel of the Morning by Juice Newton, where we see the contrast in their lives. Debbie is going from client to client and the strain is wearing her down, both mentally, but even in the brass tacks terms like her jaw, while Tommy enjoys a cigarette on the balcony of an apartment most Dubliners would give their right arm for. She gets some relief from looking at a flower Tommy bought her, and this is bookmarked by the end of the episode where she brings one to him, only now their relationship has ended, as has the life he has known till now, as has anything interesting happening with Debbie, as for the rest of the show she's kind of just there till she ODs in the next season. Tommy doesn't wake up till the 4th season, and his storyline there is one of the best aspects of that season, whilst also being a tough watch.
What?
Someone's kneecapped Ado.
What? Who done that?
The Ra.
The rat? Man, this is beyond me.
I really like the IRA as antagonists, because if you look at any of the people who've gone after each other in this show before, or even if you look at the baddies in Kin, these people are all just criminals out to survive, and it's really all about money. With the IRA, on the other hand, in these people's mind what they do is about something more, even if nominally they behave the same way as Nidge and his gang. Tony puts bank robbing and fundraising in the same sentence. When Dano is kneecapped in the following season, the justification is he's an embarrassment to the cause, but Nidge is totally outgunned. When Ado is shot by mistake, Git isn't upset because Nidge might retaliate, he's upset because of how it looks in the papers, and Nidge is made even more aware of this by having to bring their guns in. He knows all too well the sort of firepower they carry, whereas his is such a small group. It's partially because his is such a small group that Darren is so fired up to pipe bomb the pub. Ado feels close to him. This season we see Nidge brought in for police questioning, and he is cackling like a hyena, because there are rules and he knows them, and at the very least no one can snipe him in an interview room. Incidentally, this season is where we meet Carter Terry, although he doesn't really become a player to the following season. However, in all of Nidge's dealings with the Ra, everything is dictated by them, and every time he goes to see them he could be taken out at any moment. There are 3 main IRA men who Nidge has to contend with, and each is more intimidating than the last. Git is exactly as terrifying and loathsome as his actions. He's played by a man named Jimmy Smallhorn, and he's terrific because he plays him like a dormant volcano. You watch him thinking he could kick off at any minute.
Bitch knows where we are. Will you hurry up and open up?
While he is a monster, he is not an idiot. He can recognise that Nidge is afraid of him, and that he can be manipulated into importing guns for him, and potentially taking the flak if it's impounded. Considering his death is what launches the story of this season, he really isn't in it much, but he sticks out vividly in my memory. While he portrays himself as a nobleman and a man of modest means, nobody is fooled, except of course his son Dano. Dano is more intimidating because while he, like his father, believes that he is serving a greater cause, and that it's beneath his organisation to have his guns coming in on the same ship as Nidge's hash.
I want you mounting after anybody who came in with your drugs, yeah?
It's only hash, Dano.
Dano believes not only in the cause, but in his father. The mere notion of his father committing adultery is enough to get him to knock Nidge out. While his mother never says anything about Git, the way she behaves gives the impression she knows more about her late husband than she's letting on. In spite of everything Dano says about how his mother can't be left on her own and isn't doing well, we never see her grieve. She seemingly isn't moved by Dano's attempts to find his dad's remains to give him a proper burial. The only thing she expresses concerns about is his pigeons. It's almost as if he's willing himself to believe that his mother is deeply distressed, whereas the one who is really distressed is his wife Georgina, and his behaviour is what contributes to it. He's an alcoholic, but the only thing that gets him to stop drinking is getting revenge. Whatever this man is fueled by, it's never anything good. Dano is played by Jason Barry, who some may recognise from Titanic, and he gave a surprisingly frank interview about his struggles getting work, which I'd recommend watching if you can endure Brendan O'Connor. It's also sadly one of the only cast interviews you can watch in full. The rest of them on the Saturday Night and Late Late Show can only be seen in the shortest of clips. The longest love-hate interview clip is listening to Joe Duffy talk about why he hates it. Isn't that wonderful? But the one who poses the greatest threat of all to Nidge, perhaps, is Tony. Tony, who comes to Dublin after Dano asks for help from the organisation up north in finding out what happened to his father. On that note, I like that when he drives up, they show you the Boyne Bridge before any road signs, since that is one of the landmarks that indicates you're going up north. The people watching here at home will be that one step ahead of the people watching internationally. But with regards to the help Dano does get from up north, Tony is just smarter than Dano. He asks better questions and can put together a larger picture. Unlike Dano, Tony is not blinded by love of Git and seems to have an inkling of what he was like. He specifically asks Nidge if there was any trouble with the women at the brothel, and when he finds out what happened to Siobhan, he is not one bit surprised. In the Ireland these men come from, Gardaí who had drinking problems and priests who abused children were moved from parish to parish, as opposed to the perpetrators getting the help they need or the victims getting the justice they deserve. Would this organisation, which operates outside the law to begin with, be any different? In the 5th episode, these people come together to celebrate Ray, finally receiving compensation for being abused as an altar boy. There is a great scene where he's searched by the Gardaí and the police says,
"You've a lot of notes in here for a fella that's not working."
But while they are delighted justice has been done, they are also coming together to avenge somebody who inflicted the same crime on someone else. But perhaps Tony's greatest weapon against Nidge is convincing him they can do business, while Dano's attempts on Nidge's life is what pushes him to make a payment to the IRA and offer to keep the arrangement going where he imports their weapons. Had it not been for Tony's calm demeanour, Nidge would have tried to skip the country, even if, as he said himself,
It's as easy get me in Spain as it is here.
Whether they are with the IRA or with Nidge, everybody comes out of this season having lost something, on the smaller level of your pet freezing to death because you were being questioned by the police, or on the ultimate level of the loss of your own life. But Tony emerges from this season having gotten the answers he was hoping to Dublin to get, a means of bringing in weapons and a steady stream of income. Tony gets one more thing he wanted as well, a head on a plate, and the head he chooses is Darren's.
It's all too much, man. It's all too much.
This is Darren's best season. This is the season where Darren's poor judgment is brought to its most logical conclusion. Many people in this line of work will get themselves killed. Darren's route towards it is expedited because of his heart and his sense of right and wrong, as Nidge said himself.
He go to hell for you. Do whatever you ask him if you're his mate.
This is who Darren is. However, now, with no brother, no sister, and no girlfriend, it's as if this is all he has left, with seemingly little to live for. It is no surprise that Darren is now on all kinds of drugs. Nidge says,
He hears things, you know that? Darren.
Voices.
Yeah, all that.
Now, perhaps this is just a throwaway line, and certainly Nidge isn't a reliable source of information, but perhaps it is true, and something this show does well, not just this season, but the whole thing, is omit information and leave you to draw your own conclusion. We never see Stumpy admit he tried to kill Darren of his own accord, so maybe John did order it. Ado asked Dave to call Nadine to take his budgie inside. Nadine says she got no message when Ado was distraught. Maybe Dave rang, maybe he didn't. And maybe Darren did confide in Nidge that he hears voices, because this is certainly a man not in his right mind. Having had the experience last season of visiting the mother of the man he killed, he now goes for a pint with the man he's being paid to kill. And when Elmo cops what's going on, Darren gives him a pass in exchange for information to assist him with killing his cousin. And this is the man where the last time we saw the two of them together was when Elmo tried to kill him. However, I'd imagine in Darren's mind Elmo was strong-armed by Huey and he ultimately isn't responsible. It is then more wounding when the two men who are tasked with killing him are the ones he saved. Twice in Elmo's case, but in the previous season the order to kill Ado was what Nidge deemed a step too far. Perhaps it was because Nidge did so that Darren never suspects Nidge is ordering him clipped. That were it to be requested, Nidge would push back. He is saved only by Elmo and Ado not being efficient hitmen, but he is killed by somebody who shares his values.
Do you hate him?
I miss me brothers more.
Lizzie is somebody where family is as important to her as it is to Darren. Anybody who touches her brothers is fair game. She has feelings for Darren and is awkward in how she expresses them, and he clearly cares for her too, but not in an intimate way. We also see Darren declining Siobhan's advances. However, you can see him getting with one of the prostitutes, something he used to avoid.
He didn't go near the hookers. Didn't even get a lap dance, did he? Must be in love.
Perhaps Rosie really was Darren's only love. But the brief glimpse we get of Lizzie when she shoots him, she's neither happy nor sad. This is cold and rational, which is also why I really dislike what they do with her in the 4th season. I do think what happens with her later is inconsistent with her character, but I'll share my thoughts later. However, one new character introduced this season whose writing remains consistent throughout is Donna. Donna is an interesting one, because Donna isn't really likeable.
Something happened to me. But I can't say who did it and who was it. Donna, what did I say? Sorry, Owen. I'll shut up.
However, what Donna does by going to the police to report what Nidge said to her,
You say another word about it to anyone, you fat bitch. I'll personally spray paint your fat fucking face with acid, do you hear me?
she actually does the bravest thing, and she suffers the repercussions of doing that. It appears too that the actress suffered also.
The character of Donna in the last series, there was a fascinating thing where the actress was labelled a rat by people in the streets, and she kind of is the bravest person in the entire show, or has been, or commits the bravest act, in that in the face of being told she's going to have acid thrown in her face by the gang, she goes to the police and says, my friend has been raped and I think it may be this man. And that takes incredible courage. It was an incredible act of bravery. Yeah, but it's funny that she was on social media. She was labelled, the actress was labelled as a rat, and that code of silence, or that code of betrayal, and of keeping her mouth shut is quite extraordinary.
However, the reason she was threatened in the first place is fallout from her doing exactly what her best friend told her not to do. She told someone else Siobhan's secret. So it leaves us, the viewers, with a bit of a conundrum, because if one of our friends breached our confidence with somebody that they'd literally just met, we'd condemn them. However, if we heard of somebody making a statement to the police in spite of all the potential danger that comes with it, we would applaud them. But on a purely personal note, totally unrelated to the show, I just like that Donna's fancy dress costume is a Navi from Avatar, because it is the counterpoint to the stick that people beat that movie with, that it had no cultural impact. Donna is also kindly offered to have her paint licked off her by somebody who takes on a greater prominence this season.
Are you a dog board or a ladybird?
After his stint in prison, Nidge gives Fran a lend for wholly self-serving reasons.
Let him kiss me arse and tell me I'm a great fella.
However, it appears to be a shrewd move when Fran is able to come to Nidge's aid. But despite having land, a van and a penchant for violence, perhaps Fran's greatest gift to Nidge is that he is a yes man. Conflicts between these two come to characterise their relationship later, and it is when Fran starts to push back on Nidge that their relationship begins to deteriorate. But in this season, Fran does not question or call out Nidge for the same things Darren would, even though the things Nidge does are reprehensible.
You're me buddy, yeah?
This season is further illustration that when Nidge gives the speech in season 2, he was telling us exactly who he was, whereas in the last season, John Boy got himself into bad situations and made them worse. Nidge does not get himself into this mess, but he makes it messier and it grinds him down. What he jokes about in the first episode:
Fran, this is Linda. I'm speaking to you from beyond the grave, you bleeding thicko. Nidge was giving it to me up the guilt there, Fran, and I loved it.
he is acutely sensitive to in the last.
Bang bang in and out.
Like you and his missus.
Darren, I don't want to hear that again. I'm serious. I know you think it's funny, but I've enough to be going on with.
Only taking the piss, Nidge. Relax.
Yeah, well, I'm wound up enough as it is, alright?
I won't mention her again.
Don't.
Well, it is true that almost immediately after taking over from John Boy, he's flung into a mess and he himself never recovers in the rest of the show. One thing I do enjoy is we see him looking very indifferent in the opening montage of this season, despite business booming and no immediate threat. Gone is the happiness from the previous season's end. So I like the idea that despite the fact that Nidge is either miserable or furious for seasons 3 to 5 as a result of all the situations he finds himself in, this little montage at the start of the season before things tumble confirms that, even if all went swimmingly, it would not be a happily ever after for this man. But this season he demonstrates that there really is no core to him. You just sort of peel back layers and layers. As stated earlier, he is staggeringly insensitive to Siobhan. However, in spite of his rage at everyone else for making hiding the truth from the IRA more difficult, he actively invites a target on himself by trying to sleep with Dano's wife Georgina. He is saved only by the fact she's not attracted to him. However, he develops something of an obsession with her. In his previous and subsequent affairs, he treated them as such and the women knew he still went home to his wife. But with this one,
We're kind of separating, and I'd say she's had a few alright now.
he purchases Trish the same clothes she wears, which when Trish finds out upsets her massively. What's interesting is Nidge says he never saw Georgina wear this, and that's true. The 2 occasions he met her prior, she wasn't wearing this. So maybe his indignity at Trish's anger is justified and he genuinely did see it in a magazine.
J-Lo wears it.
However, he has been stalking her Facebook, so he probably saw it there. However, his lust for Georgina causes him to boil over and beat the hell out of Tommy, upon receipt of the news that Tommy was intimate with her.
That man was like a bleeding witch getting into me head. It was like fucking voodoo or something.
Yeah, it was all her fault for having a pair of tits.
He said it was a mistake.
The way Nidge responds to this is handled primarily in the 4th season, and while in this season we can see him struggling to live with himself over it after the attempt on his life, still clad in his bulletproof vest, Tommy is the one he goes to see before Trish. But in the aftermath of the event happening, he uses this situation to get back in Trish's good books.
Because it's like now, after what's happened with Tommy, you realise what matters, you know?
Not that she would ever leave him, however, because I think Trish really is in it for the goodies. From the very first episode, she seems to know Nidge is unfaithful to her. She gets this confirmed in the 4th episode, but she stays with him and has another kid with him. Why? Well, we see her trying on lots of new clothes and getting her hair done up. Perhaps that's what it's all about to her, and it's a mutually beneficial arrangement because Nidge really does need her. While this season we see Darren having to run from his apartment with nothing but the shirt on his back and spend the rest of the season living in less than ideal circumstances in Ado's flat, Darren never seemed to care much for high flying. Were Nidge put in these circumstances, this show might end a lot quicker than it already does.
Does he love Trish?
No.
I think he's the kind of man who would be lost without her. He's the kind of man, if she up sticks and left him, he'd be devastated and he wouldn't know what to do. He's that kind of man, one of those men who gives out about his wife internally and then actually when she's gone he'd be lost.
While having to live with what he did to Tommy affects him more in the 4th season, and by this season's end his pocket is lighter, both in terms of paying off the IRA and Ado informing him people are slower to pay off debts now he is seen as less intimidating in the streets after his run-in with the IRA. His supreme punishment is having to live with ordering a hit on Darren.
Darren, what's the story, brother?
What's the story? I'll tell you what the story is, Nidge. You just tried to have me clipped there and you missed.
I don't know about the rest of you, but Love Hate's one of those things where, because of how popular it was, unless you were watching it week to week the moment it was airing, the whole thing was spoiled for you.
We have also Darren, poor Darren, who got shot and was tried to kill by Stumpy.
So Darren's death had its impact lessened, let's put it that way, the first time I saw it, but rewatching it, it is really well done and it is the best handled of the main character deaths. In the previous season, the 5th episode leads you to believe that Darren, Nidge and Luke are carrying out a hit on Ado and pulls a bait and switch when the gun is turned on John. And in the 5th season, while it's pre-established that Patrick is out to get Nidge, the episode itself has you believe it's building towards Nidge's arrests. This episode takes a different approach. This episode tells you Darren is going to be killed before the second ad break.
So what's his name? Your buddy.
Darren?
We see Nidge having to let it dawn on him what he's having to do to survive. This is really the only time we see Nidge just break down and cry. But then when the hit fails, it seems like Darren might get away, and why wouldn't he? He is the main character. The season ends with him being shot on the head, and I can remember the Facebook statuses and conversations people had where they thought Darren survived this, bolstered by the news that Robert Sheehan was acting in the 4th season, only for it to be his scene in the morgue. But killing off the main character just wasn't as common when this aired, even if it did rapidly become a thing in the good telly from this decade. Darren's death changes how you watch the show, because now the main people we follow for the rest of the show are the people who betrayed him, with the exception of Fran, and it is after this that the police are introduced as main characters, so if you no longer wish to root for them, you don't have to. And thus the curtain is brought down on the best season of the show. Definitely when I first saw the show, my fondness for John Boy made me give the nod to season 2, and I had that DVD on rotation a lot more, but unquestionably this is the best one. It's so addictive. When I sat down to rewatch it for this, the plan was to have the laptop open and take notes. Almost no notes were taken, and I just watched it in a sitting. And on a personal note, of all these love-hate videos, this was the most enjoyable to make because there really isn't anything to whinge about. I just get to talk about something I love. Critically, this season was reviewed very enthusiastically. Joe Duffy hated it, so can't be so bad then, can it? And as for views, off the back of this, the ratings for the opening of the season after this were the highest the show had ever gotten. What people got, however, many saw as a dip in quality in season 4.